Well, I'm continuing to make a bit of progress on the Morini race bike, and I've mostly got the Rearset foot peg arrangement sorted. So here's one of the two new mounting plates, and you'll see that there are 3 holes tapped, and the bottom hole is the original foot peg position that was given by the original cast Tarozzi mounting plates, and there are 2 positions that are each 15mm higher than the last. So if I put the foot peg in place, and I'll show you the linkage. So this is the standard cranked rod that comes with the Tarozzi Rearset kit, and I bought a couple of cheap rod end bearings. I mean, they were less than £2 each delivered, but they're quite good enough for this application. Normally this mechanism would run underneath, but by running, 2 reasons for running this upwards rather than downwards. One is clearance on the silencer, and the second is to reverse the action of the gear change. So it's now in what they call race pattern, so that you're pushing down on the lever to shift up gears, and this gives you more ground clearance when coming out of corners. So that's the gear change side, and this is basically done. It's just I need to make a little spacer to go between the peg pedal arrangement and the mounting plate, just to give a little bit more clearance on the rod, so that we're not snagging up. It's ended up, the whole setup has been slightly narrower than original anyway. So the more complicated side was the brake side, and I'll move the bench over and go around the other side, and we'll have a look at that too. Okay, the mounting plate on this side is identical to the one on the other side, and has the same 3-hole arrangement. You can just see the lowest one visible there, and the cable arrangement on the original Tarozzi setup has always been rather inadequate, and this is a better version of the system that I put on my bike. So we've got this subplate with a cable mounting stop, the arm adjusted into this upright position, and all that remains me to do is I need to put a stop in here, so that the lever will come up to the stop, and I need to shorten the brake cable. This one's quite a bit too long. That's one designed to fit the original setup, and a job that I've got to do on both sides is a space between the plate and the end of the swing arm, where it gets its second attachment point. But overall, I'm really pleased with the way that's turned out. Oh, there are additional holes in here that take this screw, so that if you want to use the lower positions, you just move this entire plate down. Now, a lot of people they criticise these Tarozzi pedals for being very easy to break, and they are fairly brittle castings. The ones on my bike I've had on there for nearly 14 years, and I've never broken one, but I do know people who've broken them, in some cases after being clipped by a car, but you know, some people have just managed to sort of break them whilst wheeling bikes around the paddock and clipping a bollard or something. And there are other systems. There are people who do you know, machined from solid setups, but this is a very convenient system, and it's got quite a nice adjustment, and they do weld back together, which is fine for a race bike. And I picked up a load of spares from North Leicester Motorcycles, and they're not desperately expensive. We bought a couple of used pedals, and in fact a couple of cracked ones, which I will have a go at welding up. They're just cracked on one of these areas, but they do have a nice vernier adjustment system, and I've got one of my new ones on the bench, and I'll take it apart and show you how that works. Okay, well, here's the pedal assembly, and you can see it's a number of parts. You've got the main lever, the toe peg, which is bolted in, and you've got the actuating lever, whether for whatever side, you know, these things can be flipped over and various arms coming. But you'll notice you've got this row of holes, and there are 6 holes, and there's a pin, and it's vernier adjustable. So I take the retaining nut off. There are 7 holes in the lever, and what I tend to do is to pull the pin out and then lightly bolt it together, put it on the bike and adjust it, and then you see which holes are matching up, and then drop in the pin, and this piece that bolts it all together has a notch for the end of the pin, and this is the type that goes with the folding foot peg, which goes through the middle. The fixed foot peg, it's actually there's a notch in the foot peg itself. And one of the little jobs I'm going to do is make a pin spanner for locking these down. And this is a fault I've seen a couple of times, that people complain of their brake not working properly or their gear change not working properly, and it can be down to this nut, because if you don't have a pin spanner to do it up, it's difficult to get tight, and if it backs off, as it unscrews, it actually moves away, and it can lock this bearing arrangement against the mounting plate and cause enough friction for a brake to start sticking, or for the gear change to not quite return, and you end up with shifting problems. But overall, I quite like these. As I say, I've never broken one. We have spares for the race bike now, and if they get broken, they can get fixed. And having a readily available source of spares compared to having to buy something from Italy, for example, or to have to make something up and make a load of spares, it's a lot more convenient. So I want to make the spacer for the foot peg, and so I cut a blank out of a piece of plate, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the idea of having a little arbor, bolting it onto an arbor, turning it up, but there's a little trick that I find quite helpful. What I've got in the chuck is a coach bolt, so the head is behind the jaws, so when I tighten down, I'm tightening up against the back of the jaws. So I can just, I've got a washer on here for spacer, and I can just thread this on, and it will self-tighten, and it can't pull through because the head of the bolt. So I can just skim this down to, well, really I just want it round, and we'll go for a nominal kind of diameter. So let's give this a go. diode mostly cleaned up, we'll take a little bit more and then take a quick measurement. Just a tiny bit more. And yet a tiny bit more. There's just a tiny little bit of saw cut showing. Okay, that's all cleaned up, so we'll just give that a quick chamfer. As soon as I can find my chamfer tool, it's in the chip tray. And then this may just, it doesn't want to unscrew directly. We did get enough load on there to tighten it, but I can just undo the chuck and then we're free, and I'll flip it over and chamfer the other side. The chamfer's not going to be running true on this side, it's really just to break the edge. And now of course I need to chuck it up and drill it out to the 10mm. So I'm just gonna bring it even to the chuck jaws. So I just got to deburr it and one spacer.